Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Yes, the Sire's back big time. That was rotten, that was horrible. It's just dreadful, it really was. This is going to be a bit of a roller coaster of a video. It's going to have me kind of diving into this horrible performance at St James's Park. It's going to have me discussing what went wrong, what needs to change. But the roller coaster will eventually come back up at the end, because overall, Postecoglou spoke about painful growth yesterday in the press conference afterwards, and it kind of holds water, it does. And we'll discuss why, and we'll look at the numbers and the stats and the trends of where the team's going and what needs to be fixed. But I still think overall the trajectory is going in the right direction, but it just doesn't feel like it after a performance like that. The main aspect I think is to talk about is the Postecoglou system. What it requires is for everyone to be absolutely switched on playing their part. It's a really physical system. And most of all, and you'll hear them say this a million times, about being brave. And that's not just in your passing, that's in your movement as well. Because as you'll notice, and some people are frustrated, some people are excited, so we've got a bit of a kind of adrenaline rush to get out of it, is the passing out from the back. And also the passing in the final third as well. It is not just being brave with your passes, it's being brave if you haven't got the ball and making an option for the other player. It's this constant football, not being worried about coming out of your position or the fact that you know you're going to be pressed very quickly and someone's going to, maybe get a fit in, you could maybe lose the ball. It's about providing an option for them to play these little triangles to get out from the back. That's part of it as well. But yeah, without that happening, the Postecoglou system can look really one-dimensional, which it did yesterday. It just looks like they're constantly trying to, let's knock the ball out wide, get it into the box, knock it out wide, get it into the box. And it's like, it doesn't look like you're trying anything else than that. And that's because the movement isn't good enough for that. It's because the through balls, someone made a great point that wasn't even in my notes for this, that, even James Maddison maybe has stopped playing the through balls himself that he was playing to strikers. And yes, teams will kind of gather in those central areas to try and combat what Spurs do. So that is why you kind of have to go wide and throw it into the mixer or kick it into the mixer. But still, it can look very one-dimensional. And also, of course, when you're all concentrated in that area, it can leave itself very open, the system, to the balls over the top, as we saw to disastrous effect for Newcastle's third goal. Look, that's it at its worst. At its best, it's a high energy, almost like a total football kind of system with players interchanging positions. It can carve opposition defences apart mainly the defending, a lot of it is done by keeping the ball so high up the pitch, because the pressing and the aggression at the front of the pitch is so high that they have to resort to knocking it long. And then that's on whether it's a centre-back to mop it up like Van der Ven, or whether it's a covering midfielder, or whether it's one of the fullbacks has stayed back. That's how it works when it's at its best. But this was not the case yesterday. Other than that string of kind of Timo Werner chances, I think he had 3 in the opening 10-15 minutes or so. Spurs created quite little, and that was really disappointing about it. And they struggled again against a very organised, packed defence who had quick counter-attacking players. Look, not every team's going to play like that. That's not going to be... And this is the thing, there's this kind of feeling like everyone's going to work out the way Spurs play. But it's not the way a lot of teams play their football. Some will adjust and try to play it. Some won't abandon their principles. Because, look, Spurs have lost 8 of their 32 Premier League matches. It's not like everyone's figured it out. And it's not like they haven't won recent games as well. We'll talk about numbers and stuff like that anyway. But this one was just so disappointing. It really would. It is. And it was the perfect, I guess, example of, if the players aren't going to have the courage to play that pass between the lines or run into the areas to receive the ball, then it kind of creates more problems for their teammates. Because, as I said, if they're playing the ball out from the back quickly, trying to beat the press, break the lines, they've suddenly got no options as well. And I think in those moments when a player panics, when he hasn't lost the fear, as Postecoglou said in the past, I think it was in his book, that's kind of part of his process, then you get players revert to type. and you'll get them just whacking that ball long. And we saw that as well a few times yesterday, that maybe Vicario just didn't have an option on, or a fullback would knock it long, and it's like, it's just bouncing back because Spurs don't have a target man right now. They're playing Sonny up front. And for all of his strengths and talents, a target man and a hold-up man, he is not. So if you're going to do that, that ball is going to come back. And it does. It's a system that has to be played a certain way, and if it's not, it can look very brittle. This is what we spoke about in recent weeks, and Eric Dyer kind of made his comments about the training sessions at Spurs, that they have all been focused on the style of play more so than worrying about the opposition too much. He called it tactical. I think that's a bit of a misnomer, because tactical play includes setting your team up in a certain style. It's also about your style. That can also be tactical as well. I think he meant more opposition, opposition play and stuff like that, and countering. And the reason behind that is, as he said himself, Postecoglou, is that these 8 or 9 months or so far have just been spent drilling the system, drilling, and the kind of detail and the tactical stuff will then be put on top of that when that is firmly embedded. And I think yesterday was another example of it's just not there yet. It's not. That they don't totally believe yet in their own ability to play around the system or where to run. It's not instinctive yet. And there were so many times and Newcastle were good. I really want to make sure that I'm saying this. I'm not just saying Spurs were rubbish. Newcastle were excellent. They were really good. They were a unified system. I think this was the way that Eddie Howe wanted to play at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. He kind of said after that game that we didn't play to the way we wanted to play, and they ended up losing 4-1. But it just worked so well. The pressing was high, and Postecoglou afterwards, it was in his club interview, he actually said, I didn't think their pressing was any more than we'd faced at other teams. Just essentially Spurs messed it up this time, and maybe the crowd played their part. I don't know, but it's when you don't have an option and you're trying to pass it out from the back. That's when you invite the opposition around you, and they get so much closer. That can work in your advantage. That's the kind of the point of this system, is that you draw them into a degree, and then there's space in behind them. But if you don't have the option to play the ball in so you can get around them, it's all a complete waste of time, and it results in, yesterday's kind of result. Although I would say the first 2 goals were from utterly ridiculous kind of individual errors, and a whole slew of them as well. But yeah, definitely overall, it doesn't matter in a way, because the overall performance wasn't good enough. And I did feel like it was a day that showed up some of the aspects that the Postecoglou critics will point to. Mistakes that come from the constant passing at the back, gaps in behind the inverted fullbacks, open door for counter-attacking balls over the top, the high line, and also set-piece problems. They were there again yesterday. So he might not be concerned about things or certain aspects. He is concerned about bits and pieces, but he's not a guy who worries about stuff. But I do feel we're at a little bit of a point at the moment where he has to really make sure that no doubts seep into the players, because that's the key thing about his system. They can't doubt it. They have to be very kind of clear that they've got to be brave with the ball. They've got to use it. They've got to move. All those things I said at the top of this, they've got to do. They're not going to be having any kind of doubts in their head of, maybe it's the system that doesn't work. Because if they do, he's on a hiding to nothing, and it's yet another Spurs manager that won't be able to see through their project. And I can't be bothered to do all that again. I just can't. I cannot go through another managerial change, another project, another rebuild, and